When I was a couple weeks short of my 70th birthday, I started thinking about my mother's mother, who lived to be 100, and her mother, who lived to be 102, and my father, who lived to be 90, longer than anyone we had ever heard of in his family. I began to think that maybe our generation could be the first to routinely live to be 100. When I talked about this at family dinner one night, my granddaughter, who was 5, said,
"What are you going to do for the next 30 years, Grandpa?"
Hello, I'm Dr. Janet Price.
And I'm Gregg Kaloust. And we are Oldish. And this is our podcast, Oldish.
If you're oldish or know someone who is, please join us every week for conversations amongst ourselves
And our special guests
about what it means to be oldish in the 21st century.
If you ever wonder whether you're getting old, you're oldish. What are you going to do for the next 30 minutes? Hi, I'm Gregg, and I'm oldish.
Hi, I'm Janet, and I'm oldish. Welcome to this episode of our podcast, Oldish, Conversations on Aging in the 21st Century. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is an exciting episode. We're looking at literature, as we continue to do on a regular basis with our good friend Leslie Ross-Degnan, a published poet and author and child development expert. We decided to do something very different today, which is look at some poems about being oldish. So we're very excited to present this, and I'm just going to hand it right over to you, Leslie. Good to see you, Leslie and Gregg.
Thanks, Janet. Nice to be here, as always, with the two of you. So today we are going to be featuring a writer and a poet named Judith Viorst. We're going to focus on Viorst today as a poet in honor of Poetry Month, as Janet mentioned, in April. I know it's May, but we can celebrate poetry anytime, any month, right? Viorst is the author of over 40 fiction and nonfiction books for both children and adults, including poetry. You might know her as the author of the very popular children's book called Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day. I read that to my kids. I read that to my classroom kids. Probably a lot of people in our audience are familiar with that book, having read that book to their children. Well, this is Judith Viorst. She's 94 years old now, Viorst. She's been writing for a long time. She was born in 31, and she just published a new book called Making the Best of What's Left, which I want to put on my reading list. But Viorst, besides being a children's writer and a poet, also was a journalist for the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Red Book magazine. So she's written everything. She received an award for lifetime achievement from the National Research Center for Women and Families for her work as a psychoanalytic researcher, which is interesting. She went back to school and studied psychology. I just read her book, Necessary Losses, which was written in 1986. It was on the New York Times bestselling list for 2 years. And she wrote it after graduating from the Washington Psychoanalytic Institute. So it's on human development, which interests me because child development is my background. And it's a fascinating account of how we grow and change through our losses, starting with the loss of our mothers, protection, the loss of our younger selves, early friendships, love relationships, etc. Part of her theory is that by learning how to manage these losses, we gain such a deep awareness of ourselves and our lives. She is the author of the Decades series, she called it. She wrote this throughout her life, and I think it was a brilliant idea. So the Decades series is a collection of poetry on aging that we're going to read today. It starts in the 30s, and it goes on to the 90s. But today we're going to focus on poems from the 60 decade, the 70 decade, and the 80s decade, the oldish years. The poems are humorous, and they cover topics on aging, such as fading good looks, good health, the importance of family and friends, grandparenting, learning to accept aging and helping others, letting others help us when we need it, forgetfulness, many, many other topics. And so I think you might enjoy this. And we're going to share and discuss a poem or two or three from each decade that we've read, depending on how much time we have. Janet's going to read poems from the 60s. I'll read from the 70s, and Gregg's going to read from the 80s decade. This is something different for us and also for you, our listeners. But I think you'll enjoy these funny poems. And it's always good to find ways to keep your sense of humor as you age. Maybe you'll even see yourself in some of these poems. I think that's the reason Viorst wrote this series, to remind us and to help us find a way to ease this journey of aging and celebrate the humor in it. I'm going to just take about half a minute to read a short introductory poem to kind of set a tone. And then Janet's going to join in and read and discuss a poem from the 60s. The poem I want to read is called At 70, but it could probably be called At 60 or At 80. Okay, At 70. Here we go. Poetry about aging. Instead of old, let us consider older, or maybe oldish, or something, anything that isn't always dressed in sensible shoes and fading underwear. Besides which, 70 isn't old, 90 is old. And though 80 is probably old, we needn't decide that until we get there. In the meantime, let us consider drinking wine, making love, laughing hard, caring hard, and learning a new trick or two as part of our job description at 70. All right, so.
Thank you, Leslie. I love that. I'll accept that job description. That sounds great. And I'm actually in my 70s, so I guess she was writing to me.
Yeah. And she covered our whole topic. We don't need to do this podcast anymore.
She
I know.
did.
Thank you, Judith. Talk to you all later. Just kidding, everybody. All right. So my book is called Suddenly 60 and Other Shocks of Later Life by Judith Viorst. Copyright 2000. The first poem I want to read is called It's Harder to Be Frisky Over 60. Inside my shoes and my pantyhose, I've painted blue nail polish on my toes. A skirmish in the war that I wage against the constraints of my current age. Despite the advent of Medicare, I will still buy bikini underwear and scorn the notion that seniorhood means it's too late to be up to no good. I wish I would if I could. Don't give me extra time to walk down the jetway, and please don't get up and give me your seat on the bus. I'd rather be engagé than emeritus, though it's harder to be frisky over 60. I'm not prepared to sign up for elder hostel. Retirement communities? Save your brochures. I'll keep right on trucking as long as my strength endures, though it's harder to be frisky over 60. I'm standing firm against the early bird special. I'm out on the dance floor strutting what's left of my stuff. I'd rather say never say die than enough is enough, though it's harder to be frisky over 60. I don't intend to stop showing a little cleavage, nor do I intend to stop flashing a little thigh. I'm still not too old to give it the old college try, though it's harder to keep trying, and it's harder to keep trucking, and it's harder to be frisky over 60.
That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? All of that.
Mm-hmm. And I think I can say, being in my 70s, as I read this as what she was experiencing in her 60s, is I feel like I remember being in my 60s. It makes me sound like I'm so old, but I remember being in my 60s, and it feels like part of the message in that was I'm still in it. I haven't crossed over the line to true oldish or oldish closer to old, that I'm willing to show my thigh. I'm willing or want to and determined to. And anyway, I kind of remember that time, of I know I'm oldish. The numbers are telling me I'm oldish, but I don't want someone to give their seat up for me. I don't want to be treated that way yet.
Yeah, I totally get that. I don't want
Mhm.
people to treat me like I'm old. Or like today I was buying plants and some of them fell over and some guy like rushed in to help me pick up my plants. And I'm like, I think I've got this,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
kind of thing. And
yes.
it made me think about one of my aunts. She was square dancing. She and her husband in their 80s,
Wow.
Yeah, they were still going out every Saturday night and dancing. And I think that it's a message in a way that like keep doing what you're doing. If you're a gardener and you want to be in the gardening, just go out there and do it. If you want to go square dancing, go square dancing. It's like you could do all these things, right? You might have to modify instead of, for example, being in the garden 3 hours, which I used to do. Maybe you're in there an hour and you sit down, have a drink of water and relax,
Yes.
and you go back in for another hour. You still keep doing what you want to do.
Yes. It's almost like setting the stage for what rules about aging do we accept and what rules do we push against. So the fact that she has blue nail polish on her toes, and that she's kind of aware, is this something that women do in their 60s? I don't know, but I'm doing it, and I think that is that oldish, I was going to say dilemma, but just the challenge of being oldish is whatever society is saying and what we want to do personally, and the balance between that, if that is a goal.
Mm-hmm.
I think to a certain extent, when I first entered my 60s, I wasn't aware of oldishness yet. And I was thinking, oh, damn, here we go. It's all downhill from here. And thinking that what was ahead of me was getting old. And I didn't know that not yet, I didn't know that getting old wasn't going to happen yet. So I spent a fair amount of time missing in advance being young enough to actually do stuff. And we've mentioned many times on the podcast that we didn't have role models. I wish I'd known about that poem because I wasn't aware of any role models. My parents were old, I think, the day they turned 50. That's not really true. 3 of my grandparents were dead by the time they were in their early 70s. My one grandmother that lived to be 100 became a role model for that, but I didn't know that at the time. It's interesting that she's thinking about losses, but not giving up going into that period. Mm-hmm. She may have kind of invented the oldishness.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And the whole difference between it's all downhill from here, which I think was the message coming from our past generations, to it's harder to be frisky over 60. It's not impossible to be frisky over 60. It's not like you shouldn't even be considering the idea. It's just harder. So back in 2000, when this was published, she was, like you're saying, a role model, which a lot of us didn't know was there until now for us, for me. But she was thinking about that, and a trailblazer in a way.
Yeah. So I kind of want to follow that poem up with something from the 70 generation that's a little bit similar. And it's called If We Stop Trying, which I think is the whole basis of we kind of have to keep trying.
Mm-hmm.
Though we tread the treadmill daily, give equal time to yoga and Pilates, pump iron, do our crunches, do our squats. We are flabby of abs and of glutes, yet we stick to our sweaty pursuits because our bodies would be even flabbier if we stopped trying. Though we're members of a book club, take seminars on Keats and chaos theory, play tapes explaining lighter Jung and Chi, we can barely remember a word. Yet we're plugging away undeterred because our minds would be even fuzzier if we stopped trying. Though we march in demonstrations, write checks to fight injustice and diseases, defend the wetlands, ozone layer, and whales, the whole world's in a terrible mess, yet we persevere nevertheless because we can't let it get any worse, and the world would become even worse. The world would be a lot worse if we stopped trying.
Mm. Yes. Yes. Is that interesting how that was written? When was that published?
Well, she's in her 90s. It was 20 years ago. Some of these, they're a little dated, some of them, because we're fighting for, what's interesting, we're still fighting for some of the same things that we were fighting for 20 years ago.
Yes.
But there are some differences,
Yes.
And demonstrating.
Yes. Isn't that fascinating?
One of the messages I get out of that is you're still the same person you've always been, just a little bit softer in spots. So following from there, I didn't know Judith Viorst very well before this. I'd heard of her, but I didn't know her very well before we started doing this. And I'm starting to really like this person. She's got a good, wry take on how all of this stuff works. And she's clearly thinking about it. So earlier when we were talking about being frisky after 60, because of how my brain works, my brain was going in a slightly different direction toward frisky. And it turns out so was hers. In the poem that you read, Janet, there was something about flashing a thigh and that sort of thing. So there was that, definitely was that romantic friskiness in there, shall we say. By the time she got through getting in shape, she sounds like she got back in shape, lifting weights and going for walks and doing some other things. So she got herself back in shape in her 70s. When she got in her 80s, it stood her in good stead. Now I want to read the 90s book, but in her 80s, and the book was called Unexpectedly 80, which I think will probably be how we all feel when we get to be 80. It's like, I wasn't planning on this. When I think some famous person said, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. Might have been Mark Twain. I'm not sure, but somebody like that. So in her 80s, she wrote a poem called One Hallmark of Maturity is Having the Capacity to Hold Two Opposing Ideas in Your Head at Once, which really would come in handy these days. My scalp is now showing. My moles keep on growing. My waistline and breasts have converged. My teeth resist brightening. I'm in decline. It's positively frightening. A new moon's arriving. Sinatra is jiving. My husband is holding my hand. The white wine is chilling. I'm still alive. It's positively thrilling. So that's frisky in the 80s.
It's so lovely. It's funny because one of the thoughts came to my mind as you were reading was how it felt like her thoughts were jumping around, which is what happens as we get older. So
Yep.
She's talking about the different things, but it's just like, oh, and the moon's rising. And well, I'm sitting here with my husband. He's holding my hand. So there was one underlying theme for me felt like, yeah, that's what it's like. We're noticing we're getting older and we're actually really getting old. And oh, the moon's rising. And isn't that beautiful? And I'm sitting here and it's thrilling. My husband is holding my hand. So maybe there's a message there about appreciating the moment and finding the thrill, the joy, the beauty in this moment as we see for women, our breasts and our waists converging, which I think is a hilarious description of a very depressing reality.
Yeah, it is. No, there's so much truth in that, Janet. I think we learned to, look outward more and enjoy watching our children grow, or just sitting on the back porch and listening to birds or watching birds at the bird feeder. I think life becomes more basic, getting up in the morning and having your first cup of tea or coffee and just sitting there and hearing the birds or watching the snow fall. Life just becomes quieter, or it's kind of something to look forward to.
Yeah.
Life is becoming a little quieter.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard when I first read this is we've had conversations on the podcast with several people who have written books about or talked about maintaining or discovering sexuality when you get into these older years, which people told us wasn't, forget it, that's all gone. But we've talked to a whole number of people who have said, no, that doesn't have to be that way. But it's not, I forget which one of our writers that we talked to recently said this, it's not hormone driven anymore. It's not driven. It's enjoyed. The being with someone else, the sexuality isn't driven. It's enjoyed more. You can almost hear her slipping into something more comfortable in that poem. She's slipping into something more comfortable. And so while she's doing that, she's getting undressed. She's, putting on a nightie or something. And that's when she talks about her breasts and her waistline converging. So it's part of the foreplay, so to speak. And then Frank Sinatra. And I have to admit, I can't relate to Frank Sinatra and a romantic evening in the same paragraph, but she's older than we are. So the moon is shining, Frank Sinatra's crooning, we're having a glass of white wine, and my husband is holding my hand. She's not talking about sitting on the porch swing listening to the peepers in the springtime. There's more to this. So all of this is flowing into being quite frisky in your 80s, I think.
As it were.
As it were.
I mean, in a way, she was talking about listening to the peepers at night. She was talking about that even things like sex or become more quieter, simpler pleasures. There's not all this planning, and it changes so much from your 30s to your 40s to your 50s, the child rearing years in the 30s, and then in your 40s, and then retirement. And that changes when you're 60s and 70s. And it just finally becomes something, like you said, something simpler and quieter and not terribly erotic, but depending on how you think about it, you know?
Well, and I'm putting on my psychology hat for a second to say that this is the goal of intimacy, is emotional intimacy. And one of the pieces of that is physical intimacy, but ultimately it's about being intimate emotionally, which is really good news because it means no matter what's going on with our bodies and no matter how much things are changing around what sex might look like, it's so much bigger than that. And she almost captured that in that poem. She could have titled this poem, Emotional Intimacy at 80. You know, that this is what it is, having a glass of wine. So that's stimulating our tasting sense, seeing the moonrise, our visual sense, holding hands with my husband and my lover, sensory experience. All of that, you know, is part of emotional intimacy.
Yeah. We have time for another round.
Let's do it. I'm going to jump in with my Suddenly 60 book and other shocks of later life. This is called The New Alphabet. So here we go. A's for arthritis, B's for bad back, C is for chest pains, corned beef, cardiac, D is for dental decay and decline, E is for eyesight, can't read that top line, F is for fissures and fluid retention, G is for gas, which I'd rather not mention, and other such gastrointestinal glitches. H is high blood pressure. I is for itches. J is for joints that are failing to flex. L is for libido. What's happened to sex? Wait, I forgot about K for bad knee. I've got a few gaps in my M, memory. N's for nerve, pinched, and neck, stiff, and neurosis. O is for osteo, P is for porosis. Q is for queasiness, fatal, just flu. R is for reflux, one meal becomes two. S is for sleepless nights, counting my fears. T is for tinnitus, bells in my ears. U is for difficulties, urinary. V is for vertigo. W's worry about what the X, as an X-ray, will find. But though the word terminal rushes to mind, I'm proud as each Y, year, goes by to reveal a reservoir of undiminished Z, zeal, for checking the symptoms my body's deployed and keeping my 26 doctors employed.
All right, this really covered the three things, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Can we
Yeah,
relate
let's-
to any of that? I don't know.
I love all of it.
I know everything. Everything.
I know
Yeah.
that was that, and it was funny. I love her humor. This is not prize-winning poetry, but it's just not meant to be. It's meant to be humorous and just get us on track around these aging years.
Well, it makes me think about, I don't know if Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good Day was her first book, but it was the first one I knew of from her. And like you said, Leslie, I read it to my children. I read it to my students in class. But you think about from there to here, she took that book and kind of redefined challenging behaviors, brought a new view of it, brought a broader context at the very end of the book, maybe tomorrow will be a better day. So she's taken this aging, and she's like my poem I just read, putting it out there. There's something for every letter of the alphabet that's going on for us or will go on for us as we age. And it's like, yeah, but we're keeping doctors employed. We're still going to have a positive attitude as we accept these things that happen.
Oh, that's so true.
She's really clever. Her turns of phrase are really good and unexpected in many ways. And the poem put me in mind of something that I either read it or somebody said it within my hearing within the last couple of 3 years, which is that for oldish people, any social gathering, a dinner party, a bridge game, whatever, begins with the organ recital, where people talk about this pain, that pain, their cancers, their whatever it is. And that also was a clever turn of phrase, is the organ recital, where this is failing, that's failing. So that alphabet reminded me of that. Yeah.
I really think that she should, now at 94 years old, Alexandra must be pretty old by now, too. I think she should rewrite it or No Good, Very Bad Day from the perspective of a person in their 80s or 90s.
Yes. That would be fun.
Would be fun. But in a way, she's done that with all these poems. Like you just mentioned, the one you just read is a really good example.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Leslie, what else do you have?
Oh, my gosh. Well, M is for memory, right?
Yes.
I have one on memory. I have one on memory that I want to read. It's a really short one, but the title of it is funnily misleading. It's called Why Marriage Was Invented. Okay, so tell me at the end why it's called that. We'll talk about that. We're on our way to the party. Our speed decreased because we can't remember our hostess's name. It has 3 syllables at least. He says it's like a boy's, but not the same. I say it rhymes with skirt, but starts with R. He says it ends with A and not with T. And just before we finally park the car, we reach Robusta simultaneously. I just think that's adorable. Isn't that like what you do with your partner? You're both in your 70s and you're like, oh my God, whose party is this? I don't know. I can't remember. But these days, when you're having that conversation, like I just saw a movie, there was a great actor in it. He was the guy who played in that other movie. If that conversation goes on like that usually what do? We pull out our phone. She probably didn't have this external memory that we all use as our external memory. So kind of an interesting take on that.
And what is the title of it?
Marriage Was Invented. Because 2 heads are better than one, kind of, right?
Yes.
That's interesting. I was a little distracted by that because I was trying to figure out the name of the woman as you're getting through it. And when we got to the end of it, I couldn't, why are we having this poem now?
That's pretty oldish. But then
that's pretty oldish.
Decade.
That was pretty oldish. But then it became clear to me because my mother's name was Roberta. So we had that poem today so that my mother could reach down from wherever the heck she is and give me a poke, because that's what she would do. So my mother poked me through that poem. Thanks a lot.
That was a good poke,
Exactly.
I'm looking at you. I'm here with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I also want to say that these are humorous, and I have a lot of angst around my memory not working as well. And I just wanted to throw that in there as far as that's a humorous moment that she captured. I was putting myself in that scenario and just feeling so frustrated. And what you said, Leslie, which happens so much, it's that movie. I can't remember the name, but remember the main actor? Oh, I can't remember his name, but he was in such and such. Oh, I can't remember that name. And it's just like, I start feeling so helpless and frustrated. It's like and it impedes my ability to communicate effectively, because now I know in my mind what it is I want to communicate and give to you, but I can't get there. And luckily at this age, it still filters up, floats up eventually. And then we're in the middle of another conversation and I suddenly say, Robert De Niro.
Yes, right.
Everyone's looking at me like,
Eventually, yeah.
what about Robert De Niro? Oh, he was the one of, he was the movie that, so.
We were talking about an hour ago.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Or 3 days ago or whatever.
Yes.
It is funny how it comes back to you. And one of my theories about that is the more nervous I get about those moments, and I have those moments too, certainly we all do, the more tense or anxious I get about it, the less likely I'm going to be to remember what that name is, you know?
Yeah.
And so, somebody, if you're having a conversation with other people your age, everybody has been in the same situation. So somebody eventually comes up with it. Someone either comes up with it on their phone or comes up with it.
That would be a good poem.
We all come up with our workarounds and our techniques for resolving the problem. My technique is I stop trying to figure it out. And sometime fairly soon, it'll pop into my head. But as long as I'm trying to get that name, it's not going to happen. And I go through the alphabet. I have this weird thing where I would remember Robert De Niro. I would remember some obscure actor's name, but I don't remember the names of people I know. So I spend a lot of time going, let's see, it was a woman. Was it Alice? Was it Bertha? Was it Charlene? Was it Deirdre? I just go down through the alphabet trying to jog something loose with somebody's name. Yeah, doesn't always work.
That's not a bad strategy. I've done that too. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. And if you have to do that while you're talking to this person, it's not always a good idea.
Wait, I better pay attention to the conversation.
That's right.
And does your partner say, okay, how do you know all these women's names?
Yeah. Drange, Beatrice,
Deidre. Where did they all come from?
Yeah.
Well, there were actresses. It's okay. They were all in movies that I don't remember seeing.
We're laughing about this, and this is really what we want our listeners to do. Just laugh about some of these things because we're all experiencing them. There's no question about it, and it's just, it's just life in these decades.
Yes.
And we don't remember that kind of memory lapse happened to us when we were young too, but we weren't scared by it. So the being scared by it makes it worse. I'm pretty sure that back in my 20s and 30s, I couldn't remember people's names. But now it's like, oh my God, I can't remember somebody's name. That must mean I'm getting old and I'm losing it. What am I going to do?
Oh,
what were we talking about again?
I bet you remembered a lot of things about your job, though. I mean, the thing is, it depends on what you do. Like, I was a teacher, you too, Janet. It's like, I'm good at names because I had to remember, like, every year, 20 new kids' names. So I'm pretty good at names. You probably are, too. So it depends on what your background is and how you used your brain.
Well, that's true. I can remember tech. So I know all kinds of stuff about Microsoft that you guys don't know.
Exactly. I forget that stuff immediately. Dennis, my husband, says, oh, here's how you do it. It's like, oh, okay, I have to write everything down because I'm never going to rewrite how to do it,
And that was true for people at whatever age. That's why I made a living for as long as I did, because people wouldn't remember how to do something on their computer, and they would pay me to help them. So, okay, that's a good job to have. Well, I want to jump over to the next poem so that we have time to do all of the ones that we talked about, because now that I'm seeing how we're doing on the time, I want to kind of zip along with that. So in the 80s, she wrote a poem that also resonates with, I think, practically with everybody I know that's oldish now. It's called Driving at Night. December dinner parties do not thrive unless the dinner party ends at 5. Nor do we go to operas or ballets unless we're ticketed for matinees. And when we take our grandkids on the town, we must get back before the sun goes down. Our social life is suffering from blight as one by one we cease to drive at night. We sensibly accept that we must squint whenever we confront the finer print. We know our blusher cannot be applied unless our mirror's triple magnified. We count on bifocals to mend the blur that sometimes makes a him look like a her. But when the day is done, we're out of sight, as one by one we cease to drive at night. Our new best friends may lack both charm and spark, but they can see the road when it is dark. The widows bypass prepossessing guys for schlumps possessed of 20/20 eyes. And when it's evening and we're needing cars, we'd pick up fellows, if we could, in bars. We've grown to fear the fading of the light, and one by one we cease to drive at night.
Hey, that's great. The thing about picking guys up at bars at night, does that have to be, is that just not being able to see, or just in the dark in a bar? That's that driving at night.
Yeah, it's pretty funny, but it's really common apparently that I don't mind driving at night, so I end up doing a lot of the driving. And the only downside that I have is fixed by the map apps on the phone that do give you turn-by-turn directions, because I can see okay, and I don't mind the bright lights of the cars coming at me or other things that people don't like to drive at night can do, but I can't read fast enough to read the street signs. So if I don't know where I'm going, I can't get there. But with the map apps, with Siri sitting next to me telling me how to get there, that's not a problem for me. So I actually like driving at night. It's quiet. Except fairly often I don't know where I am because I can't see any of the landmarks. Even places where I've been over and over again, it's like, how far along into this road am I now? Where am I? Am I home yet?
Yeah, I've had that same experience. Like, I think I know where I am, but I don't see any landmarks, so I'm not really sure. But for me, like, driving at night is okay now because I had cataracts removed. And I think that's a big thing that happens to a lot of people in their 60s, 70s, or 80s, you know. Once I had my cataracts removed, it was much clearer. The glare didn't bother me. But yeah, driving at night, so many of my friends, especially in their 80s, I think that's a real 80s issue. Say, yeah, I never drive at night. Can you pick me up? I'd like to go, but I don't drive at night. Can you pick me up?
And then another strategy people use as they're aging is special glasses that they just put on at night for driving. And I'm thinking about technology and how that's continuing to explode and how that can be helpful to people like us as we're aging. So the GPS and that app and others, you know.
Self-driving cars.
Self-driving cars. I was thinking of Ubers. So if you're going to a party and it's going to go into the, after the sun goes down, you can call an Uber.
Yeah. I hope they can see.
Exactly.
I have noticed as we progress from 60s to 70s, 80s, that some of the ones that you've read, Greg, there were more limitations and there are fewer in your 60s. And then the poems really reflect the limitations. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely some reduction in the course of her books. There's definitely some reduction going along.
Yeah.
But it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. You know, back when I was in my 50s, turning 60, I was like, oh my God, you know, bury me now because there's no hope. But still, she's in her 80s and she's still going out to dinner with people.
Yeah.
So that's fine.
So that can be one of our oldish mottos. It's not as bad as I thought it would be.
It could be worse. It could be worse. So you guys want to do one more?
So to do one more round of poems from the 3 decades, I'm going to end with a poem that focuses on our role as we've been parents and now we're grandparents for those of us, people listening that relate to that. It's called When I Watch. When I watch my oldest son with his little daughter reading her books or patiently braiding her hair or waiting while she chooses and changes her mind and chooses and changes her mind about what she will wear. And when I watch him bathing her or kissing a bump on her forehead to make it better or tenderly tucking her into bed at night, I know that though I did a lot of things wrong, I must have done a few things right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good feeling to have.
I know. And that is such a sweet moment when you're watching your kids be parents.
Yes.
She
Yes.
Yeah.
wrote such a sweet poem about it. It is very tender moment. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. And I just want to say again that from a psychologist's perspective, it's such an important piece of aging is to be able to make sense of, accept, forgive ourselves, and appreciate what is. So those final lines of, even though I know I did a lot of things wrong, apparently I did some things right. That's the goal. To be able to get there means we're okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to read a poem called The Rest of It. I've been the who am I and where am I going thing, and the falling in love and isn't it a wonderful thing, and the married with kids and it's not always wonderful thing, and the meditation and medication and acupuncture and yoga and therapy thing, and the more or less, though mostly less, coming to terms with my own mortality thing. But the thing is, I'm still indeed here, and there appears to be more ahead. And what am I planning to do with the rest of it? Good attitude, right? It's like, okay, I'm out, but hey, I'm healthy. I could live another decade.
We're not done yet.
Yeah. So what is this day going to look like? What could tomorrow look like if we have a tomorrow? And of course, it makes me think of the recording we have at the beginning of our podcast episode where Greg, your granddaughter, says, Papa, what are you going to do for the next 30 years of your life?
Yeah. I think about that every day. It's like this, if I live to be 100, I'll be 75 this summer. So I still have 25 years to go. That seems like a long time. I know that when it's over, it'll be like, where'd that go? But, it seems like there's plenty of time to do stuff. So I plan on doing some stuff. The last thing I'm going to do today is read this poem. I'll just read it and then I'll apologize afterwards.
Okay.
And this poem is called Been There, Done That. And again, this is written by a woman in her 80s as a celebration of being in her 80s. Been there, done that. When I see a young woman strolling down the street with her gleaming hair, glowing skin, and impeccable thighs, evoking from the passing male population some appreciative glances, some longing sighs, some politically incorrect but rave reviews. And when I notice that none of these fellows is taking notice of me and my elasticized waistband pants and my comfortable shoes, I mobilize the wisdom of a lifetime and tell my envious heart, been there, done that. Calling upon my memory's rich store, to which my envious heart replies, recalcitrantly, unreasonably, but I want to be there again and do that some more. I get that. I really get that. And the apology that I wanted to make was the politically incorrect comments. And speaking as someone who was on the other side of that equation back in the day, I didn't mean anything by it. But I also feel like there's a thing that we've talked about before in the podcast, the invisibility of the oldish. And the person on the other side, the person making the politically incorrect comments in this poem, I can't do that. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't do that anymore because one thing would be really creepy. And the other one is nobody can see me anyway. So if I'm thinking that foolishly, this is something that I think a lot of people don't understand is that those obnoxious young men, the catcallers, have this opinion that's built into their head somehow that this woman walking by is really beautiful, therefore she must want me.
That's a young man, yes.
That's a young man. I can't do that anymore. I'm pretty sure that there are no young women watching me walk past in my tight jeans, thinking I got a cute butt. That ain't happening.
Well, yeah, guys, no, you're right. Yeah. I'm glad you said that. Yeah. I'm still looking at guys and think, oh, that's a nice looking young man, I don't know, like, I better keep that to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it reminds me of a line from a Joni Mitchell song, like, you don't know what you got till it's gone. And whenever I see that, whenever I'm, as a woman who used to be on the other end of those catcalls, but I'm not anymore because I'm not, it's a kid in my comfortable shoes, right? I think, it was kind of a pain when I was a young woman, but now that I'm not a young woman anymore, I kind of, long for that kind of thing again. So there you go.
Give me 5 more minutes of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we did it again. This was fun. I hope that we can find a way to do something unusual like this again. For me, this was every bit as much fun as talking about a good book that we just read together. I don't know whether our audience can tell, but I hadn't had any exposure to any of the poems that you two read until just now. So I'm getting them for the first time. I hadn't read any poems by Judith Viorst at all until doing this homework assignment. And so I'm really happy that it worked out that way. Wow. So I hope we find a way to do something really creative with our book club again.
That's good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. I thought it was really fun too. And it was a good thing to do for Poetry Month. We should do something else next year on Poetry Month. More poetry.
Try to record it in April.
Absolutely. Thank you, Leslie, for the suggestion. It was wonderful to get out of our comfort zone a little bit and try something new. And it was wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
So goodbye for now.
Goodbye. This has been great. Bye, Leslie. Bye, Janet.
Bye,
Till next
everybody.
time.
Bye.
Bye.
That's it for now. Thanks for listening. You can tell we had a lot of fun with this book club episode, and we hope you did too. You can find these and other titles by Judith Viorst on the Oldish Bookstore on bookshop.org. There's a link in the show notes and on our website. If you buy a book after clicking the link, Oldish will get a small commission, and a local independent bookstore you specify will get a portion of the cover price. It's a great way to support independent voices in these days of corporate din. We'll be back soon with another episode. Meanwhile, if you have a comment, a suggestion for a guest, or a review, please visit our website at www.oldish.me. There's a link there, too, if you've wondered how you can help support our podcast. If you like what you heard today, please tell a friend and rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.